Hey there, everybody. How's it going today? Welcome back to part 3 for my set review series for Dominaria United, Limited and Constructed. If you haven't seen the first two parts, part 1, white card set review, and then part 2 is the blue card set review. You can check them out on my channel. I have them in a set review playlist. And you'll find this one for the black one there too. When this full series is completed, you'll see all of them there in the set review playlist, so you can see them in order that way. But today we're doing black and doing all the black cards, and we'll start off with the commons. So let's just go ahead and jump right into it and see what we have for the new cards for Dominaria United. So the first up is Aggressive Sabotage. It's a sorcery for 2 and a black. With a kicker cost of 1 red, target player discards 2 cards. If this spell was kicked, it deals 3 damage to that player. This card reminds me a lot of Blightning from Shards of Alara from way back in the day. I think that card was published back in 2008, so it's been a while. But this card is just one mana more expensive to get the same effect. I think it has its places, but for limited, I think you would need to draft. If you're doing a draft deck, you need to draft multiple copies of this to make it effective. Of course, it would definitely be more effective in a black-red aggro style disruption deck, and being able to use this with its kicker over the course of the game, multiple instances of this spell would definitely have an effect. So I think it's decent in that respect, but just as it by itself, not so much. Like I said, it would need to be in multiples. So I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a low rating for limited. Like I said, if you probably draft 3 or more copies of this, I would give it a mid rating, just due to the fact that the cumulative disruption that this card does to your opponent would work better that way. For constructed, I'd also give it a low rating. This card is something that you maybe could use coming out of the sideboard to disrupt a control deck, or a well-timed casting of this spell to get rid of the last few cards in your opponent's hands, and then have them take 3 damage. So those are the kind of the scenarios that I see it being useful for in constructed. But beyond that, it's probably not something I would main deck unless you were constructing a dedicated disruption deck with this, and even then you might get caught with one of these copies stuck in your hand late in the game if they have no cards in their hand, and really only your best option then would be to cast it with kicker just to deal 3 damage to them, and there are other options that can deal 3 damage. So let's kind of see how I see this card playing out, but we'll see as the format develops. Next up we have Battlefly Swarm. It's a creature, fire exit insect for 1 black mana, 1/1 power and toughness, flying. If you pay 1 black, Battlefly Swarm gains Death Touch until end of turn. It's got the Death Touch activation ability. That's decent, and it's got some evasion. Although it is a fragile 1/1 creature. Kind of reminds me of I think it's Putrid Imp, I believe, from Magic Origins originally. That was a flying 1/2 Death Touch for 1 and a black. So similar out of that same vein. I think yeah, I don't know. Because of the Death Touch activation, that does make it decent, and it has flying. It's definitely a card that I would end up putting in my deck, probably at the low end of that, but it is a 1-drop, so I'm going to give it a mid rating, but it'd be at the low end of the mid rating. It just barely clears a low rating in my opinion, just because it is a 1-drop and it has a limited power and toughness. But the redeeming factor is flying, and it has an activated Death Touch ability, so that's pretty good. Constructed, I'd probably give it a low rating. They're just other 1-drops that are better. So But if you need a death toucher, with flying or something like that, this would be a card to use or something like that. Maybe in a commander deck, if you're doing some kind of flavorful Phyrexian deck or anything like that. So yeah, give it a low rating in constructed. Next up, we have Battle Rage Blessing. It's an instant for 1 and 1 black. Target creature gains death touch and indestructible until end of turn. It seems like as each set progresses, they improve this type of spell, the death trigger spell, or some kind of spell that saves your creature from dying in both black and white, and they seem to have varying differentiations between the two different colors. But the black ones have been kind of wild last few sets. This one giving a creature death touch and indestructible for 1 and a black. I like it. It's a surprise. It's a combat trick for sure, and it's a surprise spell that could really mess up your opponent's plans. The fact that you could block a larger, probably more efficient creature with one of your fodder creatures, giving it death touch and indestructible. It's a good trade-off. Because I'm going to give this a mid rating for limited. I really like the design of this spell and the way I could see it playing out. For constructed, I'll probably give it a low, just due to the fact that this seemed to be a repeated theme for constructed. And I've mentioned this several times in my previous review videos, is that there's just so much competition for a 2-mana instant or sorcery that could be a potential removal spell or combat trick. So I could see this being put into a commander deck, though, and maybe finding a good spot there or something like that, or some kind of theme-based constructed deck. So it's a cool spell. Definitely awesome. I like it. It definitely has its uses. Moving on to the next black common is a reprint from many previous sets. Bone Splinters. It's a sorcery for 1 and a black. Has an additional cost to cast this spell. Sacrifice a creature. Destroy target creature. Historically, this card has been really good in the past. If you have a creature to sacrifice or a token that you really don't care about, this is an excellent card to use. I would definitely have this in my limited deck, sealed or draft, at least 1 copy. Just the fact that it just, for 1 mana, sack a creature, gets to the point, kills one of your opponent's creatures. I'm going to give it a mid rating because of that. It's just effective removal, so it'll probably always hit that mid rating for me. For constructed, same as the previous card. There's just more efficient, more dynamic removal spells in constructed that are available to you. So I could see it in a commander deck, especially a token deck or a sacrifice deck that is built around death triggers, where you could use this card. But that's probably the range that I see it being used for in constructed. So I give it a low rating. Next up, we have Eerie Soul Tender. It's a creature spirit cleric for 2 and a black, 3/1 power and toughness. When Eerie Soul Tender enters the battlefield, mill 3 cards, and you can pay 4 and a black, and then exile Eerie Soul Tender from your graveyard. Return another target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. First thing that comes to mind when I see this is that I think of the legendary land from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, the black legendary land. Drawing a blank off the top of my head, but the one that mills 3 cards and lets you choose a planeswalker or creature card, return it to your hand for its channel ability. This one's kind of a weak version of that because you have to pay 4 and a black. However, this is that ability to exile it from your graveyard. You can play that as an instant, so that's pretty good. You do that at the end of your opponent's turn. It's a useful utility card in limited. It's something I would have in my deck probably. I'm actually going to be generous here and give it a low-end mid rating. I do see the usefulness of this, especially if you're doing some kind of graveyard resurgence, graveyard mill deck, and then bringing creatures back from your graveyard, especially big ones. That's a good way to get to them pretty quickly. So yeah, I'll give it a low end mid, and something I would see played in a limited deck. For constructed, continue the low 10 trend here and give it a low rating. They're just more useful, more efficient graveyard manipulation spells and creatures that are available, but I could see it being used in some kind of brawl deck or commander. For standard, explorer, pioneer, legacy, all that stuff, just don't see it make the cut. You know, maybe if you're doing some kind of casual spirit cleric deck or something to that effect, I could see it, but beyond that, probably not. It just wouldn't make the cut for it. But pretty decent, I think, for limited though. Something I would definitely wouldn't mind drafting or having in a sealed deck, and I wouldn't mind putting in the main deck. Moving on to our next common, Extinguish the Light for 2 and 2 black. It's an instant. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. If its mana value was 3 or less, you gain 3 life. So this appears to be the marquee common black removal spell for the set. It seems like they've done some kind of removal spell like this for every standard set in recent years, and this appears to be the one for this set. Yeah, it's solid, to the point, gets rid of a creature or planeswalker. Mana value 3 or less, you gain 3 life, so that's a nice addition. Instant speed, it's efficient and to the point. Because of that, I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. It's just solid all the way around, does its job. So what it's supposed to do. Not much beyond that, but it serves its purpose. For constructed, I'm going to give it a low end rating. Once again, with the continued theme that there are just better removal spells available if you're playing a constructed deck, but I could see it in a commander deck or some kind of brawl deck or something like that. So, but overall, decent removal. Definitely see it being used in limited. I could see myself drafting multiple copies of this. So we'll leave it at that for constructed and limited. Next up is Gibbering Barricade for 2 and a black. It's a creature Nightmare Wall. Continuing the Defender theme. It has Defender. It's a 2/4 power and toughness for the wall. Pay 2 and a black, sacrifice a creature, you gain 1 life and draw a card. It's actually one of the better wall creatures I've seen at common. Actually, for its mana cost and its power and its toughness and its activated ability, even though it has Defender, I like this card. It's pretty cool. It definitely fits in nicely to the Defender theme that their Defender archetype theme that they have. They're trying to push in Dominaria United, so I definitely drafted for that deck. But even in a non-Defender deck, I would consider it. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a mid rating for limited. I like the design for this card. It's pretty cool. For mana cost, power, toughness, and its activated ability, I'd take it. For constructed, I'll give it a low end rating. Just due to the fact it's unless you're building a dedicated Defender theme, wall, tribal, or power, or damage is dealt equal to your toughness instead of your power. Couldn't see it being used that much beyond that, so could see it living in a commander deck, but that's about it for the range I see it for in constructed. Next up, we have Phyrexian Rager. This is a reprint, a nice, well-placed themed reprint. Originally appeared in Apocalypse from way back in the day. I think it was 2001 when that set came out, and then I think it was also reprinted in Mirrodin Besieged. It's a useful common, that's for sure. It's Phyrexian Rager for 2 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian Horror, 2/2 power and toughness. When Phyrexian Rager enters the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. It's not on the same level, I don't think, as the white commons that they've been printing in some of the previous standard sets, where that lets you gain life and draw cards, or has some kind of evasion ability. So because of that, it's still useful. It's still something I would draft, and it's still something I would have multiple copies of in my deck. But I wouldn't give it the rating that those other white commons would get. So I'm going to give it a mid rating in limited. I think it's that's about the right range for it. If it was a newer card that let you draw a card and gain a life, or draw a card and your opponent discards a card or something like that, I'd rate it higher. But it's kind of like the ugly stepbrother of the white commons from previous sets. For constructed, I'll give it a low rating. Creatures are more dynamic nowadays that you would find in constructed, so I could see this in a commander deck, but beyond that, probably wouldn't see much use. The next common up is Phyrexian Vivisector for 1 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian human, 2/2 power and toughness. Whenever a creature you control dies, scry 1. Kind of reminds me of, I think it's the Viscera Seer from M11. Whenever a creature dies, it's a 1/1. When a creature dies, you scry 1 or something like that. Or no, I think that's the one where you sacrifice a creature and you can scry 1. But anyway, this goes really well in a sacrifice or death trigger deck. For a 2/2 for 2, when a creature dies, scry 1. Not bad. It's pretty good. It's definitely a card I would draft. Definitely a card I'd probably put in my main deck, both draft and sealed deck. So I'm gonna give it a mid rating. I like it. I like the design of it. Can be useful, especially like I said, in some kind of death trigger deck, sacrifice deck, where lets you do that on command and gives you a chance to manipulate what you draw next turn. For constructed, still continuing the low trend for it. There are other cards in constructed that do stuff like this that slightly better. So it's a good body, good 2/2, but probably caps out at the low end for constructed. Moving on to the next common, we have Phyrexian Warhorse for 3 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian Horse, 3/3 power and toughness, has a kicker cost of 1 white. When Phyrexian Warhorse enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. You can pay 1 and sacrifice another creature. Phyrexian Warhorse gets +2/+1 until end of turn. Interesting. So for 5 total mana, that being 3, a black and a white, you get a 3/3 horse with a 1/1 soldier. Basically, it's the rider that you could sacrifice if you need to do a combat trick and give it a +2/+1 until end of turn. I could definitely see this fitting into some kind of sacrifice style deck, death trigger deck. Pretty decent. Yeah, I don't know. I like it. Any of these kind of sacrifice death trigger style cards that also give you the fodder to use for its ability, I always like. They seem to play well pretty nicely in limited. So I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I like it. For what you get in the total package, I think I can go with that, a mid rating. Something I'd draft or put in my sealed deck. For constructed, I'm going to give it a low rating. Probably just due to the mana cost, power and toughness. Unless it was in some kind of dedicated token sacrifice deck, I'd give it a mid rating. But overall, just in general, I'll probably just give it a low rating and stuff. But if it's a dedicated death trigger sacrifice token style deck, I'd probably give it a mid. So, but for now, in general, low rating on that. Next up, we have Shadow Prophecy for 2 and a black. It's an instant. Domain, look at the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control. Put up to 2 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. You lose 2 life. Yeah, this is pretty cool. The fact that it's at instant speed, it looks like Dominaria United is going to make it pretty easy for you to have the 5 basic land types for the domain ability. So I think this card's a little better than at first glance. So if you have 5 basic land types, you could look at the top 5 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. And that could help if you have stuff that you bring out of your graveyard. So yeah, it's I think it's a pretty decent card. I'm going to give it a mid rating. For those style decks, I would definitely be drafting it or putting it in my sealed deck. So I like what I see with it. For constructed, I like it for constructed too. I think it's a card that you could utilize pretty well in any kind of graveyard manipulation and or recursion deck. And the fact that it has domain, I could see this easily being used in a 5-color deck, or even a mono black deck that has access to all five mana colors. So with the basic land types. So solid card. I like it. Mid across to both limited and constructed. Next up we have Splatter Goblin for 1 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian Goblin. It's interesting. Got a 2/1 power and toughness. When Splatter Goblin dies, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn. Yeah, I like it. I would definitely be drafting it. It's got a nice little death trigger removal, so you could actually take out a creature with 3 toughness with it, three or less toughness. So definitely a dangerous card to be going up against if you're attacking. So I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. Some pretty strong stuff for it for limited. For constructed, I'm going to give it a low rating. If this, I don't know. I can see it in a goblin deck or something like that being used, but they're just competition at the 2 mana drop spot is really tight. So just don't see it make the cut in a constructed deck unless it's some kind of dedicated goblin deck or death trigger deck. So I'll give it a low rating to hit constructed. Next up we have Tattered Apparition for 3 and a black. Creature Shade. It's a 2/2 power and toughness. It's got flying. You can pay 1 and a black. Tattered Apparition gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I like this. It's got evasion. It's got a 2/2 power and toughness, and it's pumpable. Mid to late game, this could be a house. If your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with it, you could actually hit him for some pretty big damage mid to late game. So I like it. Decent card. I'm going to give it a mid rating. Gosh, if it was, yeah, it's decent. I think it's a solid mid, maybe an upper mid. So pretty good. So definitely a card I'd be drafting or putting in my sealed deck for limited. Gonna give it a low rating for constructed. Just doesn't fit the usual constructed archetypes you'd see. Just too much competition at the 4 mana drop spot. Maybe in a commander deck, but competition would be fierce for that spot that it would occupy. So I'll give it a low rating for constructed. Next up we have Toxic Abomination for 1 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian zombie. 3/2 power and toughness. Oh wow, that's pretty good. When Toxic Abomination enters the battlefield, you lose 2 life. Yeah, this is an aggressive card. It's a zombie, Phyrexian, 3/2 power and toughness for 1 and a black. This is definitely a 2-drop that you're going to want to get the most value out of, since you're going to take some damage from it when it comes into play. So, but because it just says attack with me, play me as quickly as you can, get as much damage in as possible, I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I would draft 2 or 3 of these. If I had a deck that was drafting a deck or a sealed deck that lets me gain life, I'd run as many of these as I could, because that kind of negates the lose 2 life part. So definitely it's a suicidal black card, I'll tell you that. For those of you that are familiar with the old school mono black decks back in the day, the suicide black decks, this would fit perfectly into it. For constructed, I'll give it a low rating. I can maybe see it in some kind of super aggro style mono black deck, suicide style deck, but beyond that, probably not much else for it. Just so many ways to kill creatures efficiently and constructed, so I think I'd probably just cap it out at a low rating. But it might be something you would consider for that style of suicide aggro black. So we'll give it a low rating for constructed. Next up we have Tribute to Urborg for 1 and a black. It's an instant, has a kicker cost of 1 and a blue. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. If the spell was kicked, that creature gets an additional -1/-1 until end of turn for each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard. Wow. So this card screams control all over it. And if you're drafting a deck that's kind of a mid-range sorcery spells matter deck, 3-color deck, maybe Grixis or something like that, or Dimir, this card would be pretty solid in it. Yeah, I like this card. It's efficient in the early game and efficient in the late game. I'm going to give this a high rating for a common, for limited. It's a decent card. Just like the design of it overall. When I first saw it, I was like, yep, Dimir, all Dimir or Grixis for sure. I definitely have this in my deck. For constructed, I'm going to give it a mid rating. I could definitely be seeing myself putting it as in a constructed deck for removal. It's something that I would consider. Definitely for a Dimir deck. There's actually contemplating throwing that in my Dimir Toxrill deck, so we'll have to see if it makes the cut, but I like the card, like the design for it. Good early, good mid to late, so solid card. Next common is Urborg Repossession for 1 black. It's a sorcery, has a kicker cost of 1 in green. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. You gain 2 life. It's pretty solid just for the normal cost of this card. If this spell was kicked, return another target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. Wow, that's pretty solid for a common. So for 3 total mana, 1, a black and a green, you can get a creature card back to your hand and another permanent card, and you gain 2 life. Yeah, that's solid. Wow. I'm gonna give it a mid rating for limited. It's right on that border between mid and high. This could be a useful card mid to late game when both you and your opponent have kind of exhausted all your resources you've drawn so far, and you're both kind of at parity where nobody's got a true advantage in the game, but you're able to draw this and return 2 permanent cards to your hand, one of them being creature. That could sway the game in your favor, plus you gain 2 life, so pretty decent. I like it. Same thing for constructed. I'm going to give it a mid rating in constructed. I could see it being used in recursion style deck, getting stuff into your graveyard and then getting it back pretty quick with this. So although it doesn't return a creature to play, it's still pretty good. So I like it for constructed, both standard and the eternal constructed formats, including commander. So I think this is our last common. Writhing Necromass. It's a 6 and a black creature zombie giant. Looks huge. 5/5 power and toughness. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard, and it has Death Touch. Yeah, this is pretty wild. There's a lot of cards that we've seen in just the common category that could help you fill up your graveyard to get this card be able to be casted for a lot cheaper. Anything with Death Touch, big body, that's going to be tough to get rid of and limited. Be a problem for your opponents. So, pretty good. Because it's specific just to creature cards, though, that might be the only knock on it. I remember this has a cousin from, I believe it's, is it Fate Reforged or Khans of Tarkir that has the Delve cost that is similar to this, but Delve lets you remove any cards from your graveyard, so to cast it. This one just gives the discount for each creature card in graveyard. I'm going to give it a mid rating. It's definitely a card I would play in limited. Definitely would draft it. Definitely include it in my sealed deck. So something that's you gotta pay attention to if you're playing against it, or if you're drafting it, you'd be happy to have it in your deck. Gonna give it a I give it a mid rating for constructed as well. I could see it making the cut in some constructed decks, probably more notably for something like Commander or Brawl, just due to the fact that there are more efficient creatures that you might use in a standard deck. But this is definitely something I would have in a zombie deck or a graveyard recursion deck. You know, Uncle Istvan. I'm sorry, Old Rootstein. That's what I was thinking of. type of deck, you know, where you mill creatures into your graveyard, and then this is something you could cast for cheap. So yeah, it's a good card. I like it. Solid body, decent ability with Death Touch, and you get the discount if you got enough creatures in the graveyard. So cool card. Okay, let's see here. I think we're on to the uncommons here. We have Balduvian Atrocity for 2 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian Berserker. It's a 2/3 power and toughness. Kicker of 1 red, and it has menace. When Balduvian Atrocity enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah, it looks like black-red for limited is going to have that really aggressive aggro style, sacrifice, death trigger style archetype available. This fits into it nicely. It's using that black creature template with a 2/3 or 3/2 style creature with menace for 3 mana value. This card seems to be a better version of cards like that. So, yeah, I could see this being used. You could do some crazy stuff with it. You play it and kick it at the right time, could get you in enough damage in a limited game to win the game. So, decent card. I think this is a solid mid card, just right in the middle. Serves its purpose, has some evasion, brings a creature into play. Who knows? I could be wrong, and this could be an amazing card in limited. But my initial impression is that it's a solid mid card. I'd definitely be happy to draft this. Happy to have it in my mid in my deck, sealed deck and draft deck. Gosh, I don't know in constructed. There's so many things you could do with creature types and cards in constructed. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating as well, because there's just so much you can do with it. You could there's so many powerful cards for 3 mana that are creatures that you could bring back, and those have ETB triggers, death triggers, things they do when they attack, things like that. So the possibilities are pretty wide open for something like this. So I'll give it a mid for both limited and constructed. I like the card. Next uncommon is Blightpile for 1 and a black. It's a creature, Phyrexian, 3/3 defender. For 2 black, tap. Each opponent loses X life, or X is the number of creatures you control with defender. So this is another payoff for playing the defender deck type. If you have all defenders and you have this card and you do its activated ability, and it looks like, yeah, you could play this as instant speed, so you could do it at the end of your opponent's turn, so you always still have it up to defend. Pretty solid. Could be pretty dangerous for your opponents. They'd regret going up against the defender style deck. So I like it. It's on theme, pretty solid. Even if you don't have a lot of defenders, just it by itself would have your opponents lose 1 life. So that's, it's serviceable. 2 mana, 3/3. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited, right in the middle there. Good solid mid rating. I think I'll do the same thing for constructed, just due to the fact that it does have some redeeming factors aside from it fitting into the defender wall archetype. Definitely seeing it fitting into those decks. Definitely seeing it in a a commander deck. So, yeah, I like the flavor of the card. Really good, really nice. So we'll give it a mid for both limited and constructed. Our next uncommon is Braid's Frightful Return. It has Read Ahead. So Read Ahead is a new ability on sagas. Covered it in the previous 2 videos. It looks like they have saga for each color. So I'll just go ahead and read what Read Ahead does. Read Ahead. Choose a chapter and start with that many lore counters. Add 1 after your draw step. Skip chapters don't trigger. Sacrifice after 3. So for example, if you read ahead to the final chapter, you'd put 3 counters on Braid's Frightful Return, but chapters 1 and 2 would not trigger. You'd only get the benefit of chapter 3, and then of course, since it has 3 on it, you'd have to sacrifice it. So let's see. Chapter 1 reads, you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, each opponent discards a card. Chapter 2, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. That's cool. Lets you get back the creature you just sacrificed. Chapter 3, target opponent may sacrifice a non-land, non-token permanent. If they don't, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Huh, interesting. Yeah, it's a playable card. It's pretty solid. I like the fact that even though you lose a creature in chapter 1, you get it back in chapter 2. Or you could get something else back, something that died previously that you want to get back. So pretty good. Chapter 3, they don't sacrifice a creature, they lose 2 life and you draw a card. Yeah, not bad. I'm gonna give it a mid rating for limited. Something I'd draft, definitely put in the deck if it had a slot for it. So I think it's a good mid-level card. Constructed, same deal. There are some things you can do with it constructed that build arounds, stuff like that would make it decent. Probably worthy of a low-end mid-level card for constructed. Next up is Choking Miasma for 1 and 2 black. It's a sorcery, has a kicker cost of 1 green. If this spell was kicked, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. This is a pretty cool card. Early game removal to get rid of some of your opponent's early threats, that are low toughness threats. Plus, lets you kind of save one of your 2/2s if you have one on the battlefield by putting a +1/+1 counter on it. So it'll becomes a 1/1, but then after this, the effects of the spell wear off, it jumps up to a 3/3. So not bad. Yeah, I like it. I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. I think I'll do the same for constructed. I could see it being used in both decks. I would definitely have it in a dedicated control deck that needs some early game answers against some early aggressive threats. I would have this in the deck. I think it fits in nicely with something like that. And same scenario in limited. If you're drafting or building a sealed deck that's kind of a mid-rangey deck, kind of creature light, and you don't really care if your creatures die, this is something to use to get rid of stuff. So pretty cool card. I like the theme on it. Next uncommon is Cult Conscript. So 1 black mana. It's a creature, skeleton warrior, 2/1 power and toughness. Cult Conscript enters the battlefield tapped. You can pay 1 and a black. Return Cult Conscript from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only if a non-skeleton creature died under your control this turn. So it has a return to the battlefield upon death trigger, but it comes into play tapped. I can see this being used in a really aggressive mono black or black red deck that utilizes death triggers. Could be a pretty nasty threat. Yeah, it does come into play tapped, but you're getting a 2/1 for 1 mana. That's not bad. I like it. I'm going to continue with the mid-level theme I've had for the last few cards. Give it a mid for both limited and constructed. It's got its uses. It can be useful in both limited and constructed. So definitely be having this in my decks for those. Going to Cut Down for the next uncommon. Cut Down is a 1 black mana instant. Destroy target creature with total power and toughness 5 or less. This is not failed push, but it's pretty darn good. I really like this card. When I first saw it, I thought that this was something that could see play in all formats. So I'm going to give this a high rating for limited. If I ever saw this, I would draft it. I mean, unless your opponent has some kind of combat trick to increase the power or toughness of their creatures, this is most of the time going to get their creature killed. And you could even use this in response to them pumping their creatures. They have a 2/2 or something like that they're attacking you with. They want to throw something that pumps up their power and toughness in response before that resolves. You cast this spell and kill their creature before it's able to gain something that's greater than a combined power and toughness of 5. So I like it for limited. Definitely a good card. I'm going to give it a high level mid rating for constructed. I want to give it a high rating, but gosh, I'm really on that borderline. You know what? Actually, I think I am going to give it a high rating for constructed. It's right there on that borderline between mid and high. Early game, this has many uses. In constructed, it seems like there's not a lot of combat tricks that are used, like giant growth to pump their creatures. Usually it's universal type combat tricks that are used mid to late game. So early in the game, this could be a decent card. I would definitely put it in my control deck or some kind of tempo style mid-range deck. So I like it for 1 mana. I think it's worthy of the high rating. So forget the mid rating. We'll make it high. So high for both limited and constructed. Next up is Knight of Dusk's Shadow for 1 and a black. It's a creature, human knight, 2/2 power and toughness. It has menace. Your opponents can't gain life. For 1 and a black, Knight of Dusk's Shadow gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So this appears to be the uncommon mirror or antithesis mirror of the white knight that we saw in the white review. This pretty much cancels out that knight's triggered ability of gaining 1 extra life in addition to the life it gains. This just says nope, no life gain. So and it's got some kind of evasion ability with menace, pretty cool. And if your opponents do happen to block it, you can just pump it up. So that's pretty cool. Definitely an efficient definitely efficient black card for 2 mana. I'm gonna give it a high rating. I like it. In limited, it could be a house if it goes unchecked. So it's a solid card. I'm actually gonna give it I'll give it a mid rating constructed because it's easier to get rid of with the type of removal available, but still a pretty solid card. Early game, if they don't have an answer for it, you're gonna get some points in and deal some damage. So I like it. Love the flavor for it. Dominaria continues that black-white parallel knights where they had back in the original Magic set with White Knight and Black Knight. So pretty cool to see they're continuing that trend. Next uncommon is Monstrous Warleech for 3 and a black. It's a creature, Leech Horror. Its power and toughness is star. Has a kicker cost of 1 blue. So it has Monstrous Warleech enters the battlefield. If it was kicked, mill 4 cards. Monstrous Warleech's power and toughness are each equal to the highest mana value among cards in your graveyard. Oh, that's cool. So it's not dependent on total cards, but just the highest mana value among cards in your graveyard. So I can see this in a Sultai deck where you mill Titan of Industry or something like that into your graveyard, and all of a sudden it's a 7/7. So yeah, pretty cool card. I think I'll give it a mid rating for both limited and constructed. I don't know. It's right on that line between mid high for limited, but constructed I think it's a solid mid card. So for its cost and what it does, decent card. I'd love to have this in a sealed deck or draft deck. So might be looking to draft that. Next uncommon is Pilfer for 1 and a black. It's a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card. Wow. They're trying to get as close as they can to Thoughtseize without it being Thoughtseize. Yeah, this is a pretty efficient card. Yeah, I like this. I'm gonna give this a mid rating for limited. It's probably something it would definitely be something I draft and maybe have a copy in the main deck. Bring it in from the sideboard once you know what your opponent is playing to try to strip an annoying card from their hand. Constructed, I'll give it a mid. It's close to high, but I mean, if it was, well, the next level up would be Thoughtseize, so I think this is right there behind it. They've had similar cards like this that have some kind of drawback, but this one I think the only other thing you could do is just take the generic mana cost off it and just have it cost 1 black, but then it becomes Thoughtseize essentially. So this is an efficient card. I would probably be running 4 of these in the main deck if I'm playing a control or mid-range deck, and if I didn't have them in the main deck, I'd probably have a full complement of them in the sideboard. So solid card. Solid card. This is, yeah, I'd say upper end mid-level card for sure. Next uncommon is Singer Connoisseur for 3 and 2 black. It's a creature vampire, 3/3 power and toughness, has flying. Whenever one or more other creatures die, put a +1/+1 counter on Singer Connoisseur. This ability triggers only once each turn. Pretty decent. 3/3 body with flying for 5, and then when another creature dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, but it only triggers once each turn. That's the only drawback. Not quite a Singer Vampire, but kind of its weaker cousin. I think I'll give it a mid rating, just due to the fact that it does have the ability to grow in size, and it has evasion. That's always valuable in limited. So I think I'll go with that for limited. I'm gonna give it a low rating in constructed. In the terms of constructed and vampires, it's kind of underwhelming, a little slow, a little bit on the slow side. I could see it in a vampire tribal deck for commander or brawl, or just a casual constructed deck. So I like the flavor for it, but beyond that, I can't see it going above a high-end low rating. So let's see. Next uncommon is Sheoldred's Restoration. It's for 3 and a black. It's a sorcery. It has a kicker cost of 2 and white. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If this spell was kicked, you gain life equal to that card's mana value. Otherwise, you lose that much life. Exile Sheoldred's Restoration. So return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So that's just the normal cost for it. And then if you do, you lose life. You lose that much life, equal to its mana value. But if you paid the kicker cost, you gain life equal to that card's mana value. Interesting. I'm gonna give it a mid rating for limited. I don't like the drawback. It's pretty strong, and not in a good way. It's pretty strong cost, pretty detrimental drawback. Losing that much life kind of eliminates, unless you kick it, eliminates the ability to bring back a really large creature. Constructed, because they're build around type style cards with this, I'll give it a mid rating. This is kind of a low end mid rating. It does play into the recursion styles, reanimation stuff that you can do in constructed, but kind of got a steep price with it. So average card, I think, in the truest sense. Mid-level card, but low end of the mid-level rating. Okay, I think we're moving on to the rares here. First rare is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. So Braids is back. That's pretty wild. She was a crazy card back in the day. So it's Braid's Arisen Nightmare, 1 for 1 and 2 black, so 3 mana value there. Legendary creature Nightmare. It's a 3/3 power and toughness. At the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with it. For each opponent who doesn't, that player loses 2 life and you draw a card. Interesting. It's not as oppressive as the original Braids. And it's an option. It's a May ability. So, yeah, if you don't do anything, nothing happens. And it's just a 3/3 creature. So, it's hard to say. I think this is definitely a build around card. You just need some of the right tools to make her really oppressive. And Yeah, you'd have to draft the right style cards. I'm going to give it a mid rating upon first impression for limited. You just have to have the right tools to make her work and really punish your opponents. This actually might fit really well into the black-red artifact sacrifice deck that's in standard right now. So this could work out pretty well. That being said, for constructed, I'll give it a high rating. I think there are things you can do with it that, with the right tools that you can use in constructed, you can make your opponents really pay. It's just good enough to make, I think, a high rating for constructed. If you don't have the stuff, it becomes tough to use. So definitely a flavorful card too, though. I'd like to see it used in Commander. There's probably all sorts of wild stuff you can do with that in Commander. So cool card. Love the flavor. Amazing artwork. Crazy to see Braids back after all these years. So really cool card. So the next rare is Defiler of Flesh. So this is the black Defiler card for 2 and 2 black. It's a creature, Phyrexian Horror, 4/4 power and toughness with menace. As an additional cost to cast black permanent spells, you may pay 2 life. Those spells cost 1 black less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of black mana you pay. So whenever you cast a black permanent spell, target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains menace until end of turn. I think of the Defiler cards that we've seen so far, this is probably the weakest of the ones I've seen so far. But it's an efficient 4/4 menace in the 4-drop slot. When playing a mono black deck or a rotation proof mono black deck for the upcoming Dominaria United standard format, one thing that black did have, it had an absence of decent 4-drops. So I think you could work this in. It could be decent. For limited, it's pretty good. Even though it's probably the weakest of the Defilers I've seen, it's still strong. I like it. I'm going to give it a high rating for limited. Makes your black spells you can pay life instead of paying the black mana for them, so might be able to get them out pretty quick. And it gives a creature +1/+1 and menace, so that's solid. I think I'm going to give it a mid rating for constructed. I kind of need to see it in action before I would rate it any higher. I think the previous Defilers got high ratings, so this is probably the lowest of them for the Defilers so far. Love the flavor. It does have the evasion, but the fact that it only gives 1 creature +1/+1 menace when you cast a black permanent spell. It'd be kind of cool if it did it for all your creatures, but of course it'd probably be a Mythic then. So pretty solid card. Be amazing in a Commander deck or a Devotion deck. Devotion deck, this card would go nuts. So allow you to go nuts with your other cards. So pretty cool. Yeah, for the mid-level, probably high-end mid-level for that, for constructed. Next one is Drag to the Bottom for 2 and 2 black. It's a sorcery, rare, has domain. Each creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is 1 plus the number of basic land types among lands you control. So if you have all 5 basic land types, you could actually have all creatures get -6/-6. It's pretty good. Definitely see this fitting into a domain deck. Or, with some of the mana fixing that I've seen coming up for in Dominaria United, they make it possible where you could actually kind of play a mono-colored 5-color deck. That sounds kind of weird, but where it's a solid dedication to a 1 color, but you have access to the 5 basic land types to give you the best of the domain abilities. So pretty decent. If you know how to build it, I would roll with it. I'm gonna take it as a high rating for limited, because you're gonna have access to your basic land types pretty easily, I think, in limited, if you prioritize your draft picks correctly, or if you build your seal deck angled towards that. For constructed, as far as board wipes go, I'm gonna give it a mid, just due to the fact there are other board wipes for 4 mana that you can use to just destroy the creatures outright. And of course, Meathook Massacre. that's a mythic level removal card, but this comes in a little bit behind that. So yeah, give it a mid rating for board wipe for constructed. I could be wrong as the format advances. We'll see, but those are my first impressions for it. Next up is Evolved Sleeper. It's for 1 black mana, creature human. It's a 1/1 power and toughness. You can pay 1 black. Evolved Sleeper becomes a human cleric with base power and toughness 2/2. You can pay 1 and 1 black. If Evolved Sleeper is a cleric, put a death touch counter on it and it becomes a Phyrexian human cleric with base power and toughness 3/3. Or you can pay 1 and 2 black. If Evolved Sleeper is a Phyrexian, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So this is the level up style cycle of creatures we've been seeing over the last few years. I like it. Definitely could see this used in an aggro style deck. Really awesome 1-drop you could use in a mono black deck or a black red aggro style, or even a cleric themed deck or something like that. The cool thing about it is the third ability, you can use that multiple times so you can just pay 6 or 9 mana to put 2 or 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and each time you do that you draw a card and you lose life. So yeah, it's a solid card. I'm going to give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. I could see it being used to its fullest abilities in both of those formats. So solid card. I like it. Can't wait to see it in action. Next rare is Shadow Rite Priest for 1 and a black. It's a creature, human cleric, 2/2 power and toughness. Other clerics you control get +1/+1. So this goes nicely with the previous card that we previewed, because that you can make into a cleric, and that'll get a boost from this. You can pay 3 and 2 black and tap it, sacrifice another cleric, search your library for a black creature card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. That's powerful. So it could be any black creature card as long as you sacrifice a cleric. Unfortunately, you can't sacrifice itself, so still that's powerful. You have a big giant creature in your deck and you just go search for it, 5 mana, and put it onto the battlefield. I think this is going to be our first epic rating for black today. That might be a little generous, but just due to the fact for what it can do, that's kind of bomb style effect. You can do this at instant speed, it looks like. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about playing it as a sorcery, so that's pretty solid. I'll give it epic for limited. Constructed, yeah, I think I'm going to go high on constructed. Just due to the fact that it can be dealt with a little easier in constructed. When you cast this, you put it on the battlefield, your opponents could blow it off the board. It's a little harder to do in limited, just due to the fact that removal is not as abundant. So, really good card. It's a cleric lord that lets you go get something big and nasty and throw it onto the battlefield. So, yeah, that's a solid card. Probably make a pretty good impact in Commander as well. So, for you Commander players, this is a really cool tool to have for any of your black decks that you have. Next rare is Stronghold Arena for 1 and a black. It's an enchantment. It has a kicker cost of 1 green and or 1 white. When Stronghold Arena enters the battlefield, you gain 3 life for each time it was kicked. So it looks like you could gain up to as much as 6 life with that. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you may reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. If you do, you lose life equal to its mana value. One or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player. You may reveal the top card of your library and put it into your hand. Interesting. But you got to be able to have it. You got to be able to have it deal damage to your opponent in order for you to really take advantage of its ability. And if you don't kick it and you don't deal damage to your opponent, it's not going to do anything. So, I'm going to give it a mid rating for limited. It's right on that border line between mid and high, but because it doesn't do anything immediately unless you kicked it, it's just sitting there until you're able to deal damage to a player. So, and it's combat damage too. So that's kind of the tough part. For constructed, I think I'll also give it a mid rating. You got to definitely hit your opponents in order to be able to draw these cards. So I could see it being more useful in Commander, just due to the fact that there's just more creatures that are going to be on the battlefield for you. You'll probably be able to connect at least once with your opponents. Plus, it'll probably be easier to kick just due to the pace that Commander games go. So, interesting card. I kind of want to see it in play before I would have an ultimate final determination on it. But I like the flavor for it. It's kind of a ancestor of the Phyrexian arena, but Stronghold arena. A little different, but pretty cool. So we'll see how it goes. Might fit into a life gain trigger deck as well. We'll see how that plays out. Next up is the Cruelty of Gix. It's a saga for 3 and 2 black. It has read ahead. Chapter 1, it says target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a creature or planeswalker card from it. That player discards that card. Chapter 2, search your library for a card. Put that card into your hand, then shuffle. You lose 3 life. Chapter 3 is put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Yeah, that's pretty solid. Let's see here. Yeah, I like it. I'm going to give it a high rating for both limited and constructed. Yeah. There's a lot you can do with this. This is a pretty powerful cruel saga. Lots of things you can do with it. So pretty decent. The neat thing is chapter 3 is you can return a creature card from a graveyard. So it could both be your opponent's or yours. That's pretty versatile there. So I like that. Definitely worthy of the high rating in both limited and constructed. So solid high rated card. Next rare is the Raven Man. For 1 and 1 black. Legendary creature, human wizard, 2/1 power and toughness. So for those of you that read the Magic story, the Raven Man has been a long-time character that has followed Liliana through the plains, kind of pestered her and bugged her, and she's wanted to be rid of him for a long time, but it's kind of neat to see that they finally put a card on this artwork. Really cool, flavorful card. So let's see what it does. At the beginning of each end step, if a player discarded a card this turn, create a 1/1 black bird creature token with flying, and this creature can't block. Pay 3 and 1 black to tap. Each opponent discards a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Definitely a solid, flavorful card if you know what the character does in the books or in the story. It definitely fits this the flavor for or the story behind the character. So as far as playability goes, you got to be able to get them to discard on a consistent basis. You can use the its activated ability, but it has to be as a sorcery. I'm going to give this a low end high rating. The reason why is because you can generate tokens with this that fly, although they can't block. That's something that could build up over time and be useful against your opponents. And who knows, you can end up winning the game that way in a long drawn out game and limited. So I like it. For constructed, I'm going to give it a mid rating, just due to the fact that it's a little slow with its activated ability and the fact that the bird tokens can't block. That kind of stinks. But still, it could have its usefulness. So might fit into a human deck. I could see it definitely being used in a commander deck for sure. Maybe a humans deck or something like that. So, love the flavor, love the theme behind it. Cool to see that they finally made this guy into a card. Okay, so I think we're on to the Mythics now. Yep, there we go. And look who's waiting for us. Liliana of the Veil. This card hasn't seen standard play since the original Innistrad. This card is crazy, amazing. I can't list enough, or I can't list all of the crazy things you can do with her. That's why she carried such a high price tag, value-wise, in for cards for all those years for modern related decks. So yeah, so she's Liliana of the Veil, 1 and 2 black, legendary planeswalker Liliana, with 3 loyalty. You can +1 her and have each player discard a card. You can -2 her, target player sacrifices a creature, or you can -6 her loyalty and separate all permanent target player controls into 2 piles. That player sacrifices all permanents of the pile of their choice. Yeah, it's pretty wild. This card is a staple in the Jund decks that have been around for Modern for years. Gonna give it a... I mean, she's so versatile. I mean, I'm gonna give her an epic rating for both limited and constructed. The reason why is if you're able to continuously make your opponents discard a card in limited, you're just wrecking their day, making their options less and less as each turn goes by. Or you can -2 her to make them sacrifice a creature. Same thing in constructed. There's a lot of benefits from making your opponents discard a card and you being able to discard a card. So can't say enough good things about that. And of course her ultimate, if you're able to get that off, just amazing. So can't say enough good things about this card. It'll be fun to see how it plays out in the formats for standard, or now that it'll be more easily available. Like to see how she does in Commander, because we know what kind of work she can do in the modern and legacy formats. So really cool card. Glad to see it back in reprinted in Dominaria United. And I love the artwork. The artwork's fantastic for it. Next up, I believe this is the last card for black. It's our last Mythic, Shieldred the Apocalypse. Mythic rare, 2 and 2 black. It's a legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor. 4/5 for the power and toughness with Death Touch. Whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. Yeah, this is another epic level card. Just really efficient. I'm going to give it an epic rating for both limited and constructed. They really hit a home run, I think, with both of the black Mythic rares. Both worthy of the epic rating. 4/5 Death Touch for 4. That's solid. You draw a card, just even from your draw step, you gain 2 life. Anytime your opponent draws, they're going to lose 2 life. So puts them on a clock, a very short clock, I think. So this is going to be a house for both limited and constructed. Really good 4-drop. Yeah, actually, that's why I gave the Defiler card for black a few reviews ago. That Defiler, just a high rating or a mid rating for constructed, because Shieldred, I knew she was in the 4 mana drop slot, so I'd definitely like to have her to use in a constructed deck. So bomb card all the way across. So solid card. That'll do it for black. Next up, we're going to do red, and I'll have that video available to you shortly, and we'll continue the set review. But black was really fun to go through. This is a really cool, powerful black cards, it seemed, for this set. So can't wait to play them in both limited and constructed. So that's it for this video. We'll see you for the red video, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Take care.